Hello everyone, welcome to a Panini podcast. Today we have myself, Justin Aunger, ESR 3 on the Panini project. I'm working in the physical activity work package. And with me I also have
Aunger and Rizwan Tahir. I am ESR 8 and I'm working in physical activity and nutrition influence in aging, particularly for the elderly people undergoing major abdominal surgery here in Netherlands.
Yeah, and I'm also working at the University of Birmingham, but we're both in the Netherlands right now because I'm on secondment as part of the Innovative Training Network program, which basically means I've come to TNO for a month to learn about prehabilitation and data science techniques and to apply those to my own data set, and also visit other cities in the Netherlands and see how prehabilitation works in practice in the Netherlands. So we thought it would be a good time to do the podcast.
Yeah.
And so we have a few questions here we're going to go through and ask each other. First question.
I think before we go for the question, I just wanted to say this. Among other countries, prehabilitation, which is quite a new concept, maybe not that old concept, but really new one, and that is very popular also in Netherlands. Only few countries where this kind of work is happening. It's Canada, New Zealand, or Australia, UK, Netherlands, and Spain only.
Yeah.
So that's why it is very interesting topic, and it has been implemented in the many hospitals already in Netherlands. That's why it makes this topic very beneficial for elderly people, especially high risk ones.
Yeah. And prehabilitation, just to be clear to anyone who doesn't know what it is helping people get fitter before a major life event such as surgery.
That's
typically
100% correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically by making them stronger and fitter before, they recover better afterwards and see less complications, for example.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so, we'll get into some of the questions.
Yeah, we can go with our questions now. So we interview each other.
It's already so fluid. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we're going to start talking about how we initially came across the Panini project and why we decided to apply to it.
Yeah.
How did you come across it, Rizwan?
Okay, so because when I was before moving here, I was living in Finland, so I was working there, and then I thought, okay, I think it is good time to do for post-graduation. So then I went to my professor who was my master degree supervisor and my master thesis supervisor. I went to her and I asked, I want to do the PhD now. And then she told me, I don't have at the moment any vacant position, but I have heard that there is one position somewhere within one European training network. So she started looking and she told me, and she even told me that there is one guy already, that is our ESR 9, Dima. So she told me that there is one guy already started his PhD last year. So then she told me, and then I found out there is a position open in Netherlands. And that's how I applied. I got selected. And I came here in late 2017.
Yeah.
And how did you find the position?
Mine is
Mr.
not so exciting as that.
Okay.
But I found it on jobs.ac.uk, which is a job searching website in the UK. And I thought it was a good opportunity to apply everything I'd learnt previously in a more practical way, because I started this project just after finishing my bachelor, so I was quite interested in more practical applications of research and trying to actually make a little bit of difference to some people in their day-to-day lives. Yeah.
Great.
So I think I already touched a little bit on the next topic, which was the motivation for applying for the post, but I imagine for you it would be quite similar.
Yeah, it's kind of similar. I just wanted to, especially my motivation toward research developed not after my undergrad, but in my graduate studies and during my master degree. Because I actually wrote the master thesis, and then I kind of, felt that I could go into research. And that was, of course, my biggest motivation to apply for this PhD position, because I already touched a bit of longitudinal data and I started liking the research. So I thought, okay, let's do it after some year. Of course, not immediately after my master degree, but after some years.
Yeah.
And do you have like any particular motivation apart from job?
Well, I mentioned, I wanted to, apply my knowledge in a new way, and therefore also try to help people in a sort of real world setting. And maybe also contribute some knowledge of my own. Yeah, because I wanted to feel more useful than I felt previously. Because in a bachelor, you just are doing things to get the degree, but in the PhD, it's more applied, and you feel like, you can actually, people will actually maybe notice what you're doing.
Exactly. People might notice, and on the other hand, I think the research is a very good method to exfoliate different domain of health outcomes, especially when we are talking about Panini, so the physical activity of elderly people and the nutrition requirement for them and psychological treatment for them, so which is very important, and only by doing research we can kind of exfoliate all those domains, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So we've already mentioned that we're both sort of doing research in the prehabilitation area, which again is to help people get fitter sort of before surgery. And so what have you been working on so far?
Okay, so I have been working on prehabilitation, especially for the elderly people who are undergoing major intra-abdominal surgeries. So if I remember correctly, you are working in major surgery, but in terms of hip and knee replacement, right? So that kind of surgeries, if we do the prehabilitation for hip and knee, and if we do the prehabilitation for major abdominal surgery, that are two different kind of prehabilitations should involve. So, which means that no one size fit all. Because for major abdominal surgery, if you want to make patient fit, you don't really try to make their quadriceps or their hamstrings strong. So that may be very goodful for hip or knee replacement, something like that. But it's maybe not that useful for major abdominal surgeries. So in that way, I have been meeting elderly people and seeing in Maastricht Medical Center like how they have been trained and how many times in a week they come, and then after that the post-operative outcomes. For that, I really didn't get a chance to go there like many times and see how things are going, how things are happening. But I definitely think from knowledge, from literature, from randomized controlled trials until now, that it has been working very perfectly. And one thing which I assume, and I think later on it turned to be a bit correct as well, that this prehabilitation is benefiting more on high risk patients. So if you, for example, if somebody, imagine an athlete is going for the prehabilitation, he's already fit, let's say, and he's already having psychophysiological reserve capacity is more in athlete than in elderly people. So his benefit, the athlete's benefit, will be a little more. But imagine a person who is already, let's say, aged, frail, weak. He or she is going to get more benefit out of that. So that was my assumption as well, that the more frail all the elderly people, or kind of say high risk patient, would get more benefit out of it.
So what exactly did you do to see whether this was the case? I know you have a review.
Yeah, I had a review. I had a review paper about what type of exercise they do, and is there any change in the intensity or whatever, and what are we lacking, what are we missing. So are we just measuring only the complications, or are we also measuring the impact of those complications and how quickly the patient gets recovered after the surgery? So there is definitely a scale to measure the complications, but not the impact of those complications. So that precisely I was doing in my review paper. And if I'm correct, you have been also doing kind of review.
Yeah.
So how was your experience, and how did you find?
Yeah, so my review focused on interventions to reduce sedentary time in older adults in general, particularly in non-working older adults. And that's now been published at the journal Maturitas, if you want to look it up.
Yeah.
And basically I found that while there are a few interventions that already exist, they are typically of very low quality. They haven't been investigating clinical outcomes, so that's things like blood, physical function, and things like this. They mostly only look at whether or not the intervention can reduce sedentary time, but not the effects of that on health. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, it's still kind of unclear from interventional data whether or not sedentary time, a reduction in sedentary time can improve the health of older adults. It's mostly just whether or not the intervention can reduce sedentary time in itself. So to that end, I started to develop a trial to see whether or not an intervention to reduce sedentary behavior can actually work in a prehabilitative context. And that study is called the INTEREST study. So that's an intervention to reduce sitting time in older adults undergoing orthopedic surgery.
And that's ongoing, right?
It was ongoing. It's now finished.
Okay.
But you can also find the protocol for that published in the Pilot and Feasibility Studies journal.
Great.
And I'm now writing up the results and hopefully publishing it soon as well. So basically, they recruited them about 10 weeks before surgery. We managed to recruit 35 people and had both an intervention and a usual care group. Mm-hmm. And the aim was to see whether or not it was feasible primarily to deliver this study, but also to see whether it might have potential to improve physical function before surgery and thereby lead to better post-operative outcomes.
Yeah, well, Justin, you already mentioned something about your, sample size and about the INTEREST project, but I wanted to ask from you, like, when you were recruiting your participants or patients, so did you come across like any kind of difficulty or in getting approval or finding people, or maybe if I know, to best of my knowledge, Britain is full of multi-ethnic people. So how was the experience working with, if any, how was the experience of working with multi-ethnic people?
Well, my sample did not end up being very multi-ethnic. Okay. It must be said. I did have like one patient that was of Pakistani origin, like yourself, but unfortunately they didn't stay in the study until the follow-up time point. So they were only there at baseline. But just because of the way the surgery, the recruitment worked, it was very much a convenience sample. So just the people who wanted to take part. Although everyone was approached that was eligible for surgery, only people that wanted to respond to the advertisement actually ended up taking part. And so we did end up with a predominantly white, like middle class population. But it was still very difficult to recruit. So the average, we only had like an average of 3 participants per month over a 12-month recruitment period. So that ended up with the 35 people.
All right. So if I may ask, because we can find it also in your protocol or in your study, but like if you can mention very briefly, like was it 1:1 ratio or 2:1 ratio? And if it was, like, was there any specific reason for that?
Yeah, so we did have 2:1 randomization. So there ended up being 24 in the intervention group and 11 in the usual care group. And that was to basically to have the most people in the intervention group as possible to see whether or not the intervention was effective. And that was we decided to do that just in case, we didn't end up recruiting as many people as we wanted to. And the original target was 45, so we did end up with fewer people than we wanted to.
And you want to see more people, like how the intervention is affecting on them. Of course, like the more patients in the intervention group, you would find more things. In a way, like very sensible, definitely.
And of course, we still wanted to have a comparison group. So it was kind of the best of both worlds.
Great.
Yeah. And you also were making a model, or still making the model. I think it's finished now, right? But you're still trying to publish it.
Yeah, exactly. That I was trying to make model on the allostasis and allostatic load and allostatic load index. So
can you explain what that is?
Yeah, of course I'm going to. So under perfect circumstances or perfect condition, our body maintain normal homeostasis. like all the multi-system, they work in a normal way. And then if there is some kind of major life event happens, or stress, trauma, whatever, so our body get to disturb. So that is called allostatic load. That disturbance is called allostatic load. But after some time, again, in normal circumstances, our body reacts in a way that after some time it again come to the normal homeostasis level. But with the repeated stress on the multi-system, so people start to get more allostatic load, and that after some time it become permanent damage in the multi-system in our body. So to measure or to quantify that allostatic load, we have allostatic load index. With that we can measure like what type of systems are already disturbed. When I was trying to find, or when I thought about this topic, I couldn't find any allostatic load index or any quantification methods for elderly people. And since we are in the consortium where we are working mostly with elderly, so I thought, why not make an allostatic load index for elderly? So then I started working on it with the help of also the data scientist from my own department. And I have been looking like hell all like the topic and everything, and then I focused myself with the 26 biomarkers from different domains, from neuroendocrine, from metabolic, from immune, from cardiorespiratory, and also anthropometry. And that the reason to take only those 26 biomarkers was because they have been already published in just around 2010, and also like many of them are in our toolkit already. So then I thought, okay, let's go with that. But then I started finding about the already published data, because I was supposed to make a Bayesian type of modeling too. And Bayesian type of modeling is the probability model, where you can it can be a probabilistic model, and you say like if that much is higher, let's say some biomarkers are higher, what would be the overall allostatic load index? But then there was again some problem that with the passage of time, though elderly have some kind of problems going on with the multi-system, but then there are some problem that some biomarkers, they dissolve within time, or some biomarkers are too disorder specific, for example dopamine. So it is like too disorder specific, and I had to reduce, and after all, like I came up with like 10 biomarkers which were kind of related with elderly people. And that model is finalized yet. It is just a matter of submission.
Mm-hmm.
So we are like all of the authors, we are agreed to submit it in psychoneuroendocrinology journal.
Yeah.
And the abstract has already been accepted for the ISPNE, International Society of Psychoneuroendocrinology, for this August. It has been accepted already. Mm-hmm. So not me, but one of my supervisor actually, Victor Cullen, is going to present that.
Oh, nice.
So it's already been accepted, and that's why like we are thinking of sending the article to the same journal where the abstract has been published.
Yeah.
So finger crossed.
Yeah. Hope so. Yeah. And so maybe we could talk a bit about the implications of the research, both the review and the model.
Yeah, definitely. If I want to say something about my review paper, so I think it is giving some highlights of the proper content of the rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
So in the literature we have found a lot of flaws, a lot of some guideline missing, some there was not proper intensity measuring while doing physical activity.
Yeah.
And people were not very satisfied, like the elderly people, if they have to come from their comfort zone to the hospital for doing the rehabilitation, for them that was not very feasible for them. So I think in my review paper, which is already accepted and it is already in a press in European Journal of Anesthesiology, and it is going to be published really soon. So I have actually found some very interesting thing when writing the research literature review, like what kind of physical content we should do with the elderly people, and what should be the recruitment method, and what are the post-operative outcomes. Right. And what should be the post-operative outcomes, and how we should measure. and take into account all those things. And the most important finding was how to see and measure the impact of that post-operative complication. So that is one thing. And the second thing was Bayesian networking modeling about allostatic load index in elderly. So if it get published, then it will be the first allostatic load index for elderly people. It has been never. Of course, that is. I'm not saying that I have been. I made that model, and that is like perfect model to quantify something for elderly. But at least it is giving the foundation for the next research, like how we can step by step go and measure the total allostatic load for the cancer patient undergoing major abdominal surgery, most probably, or any type of major life event, and how we can quantify that. And that is the main goal of that paper.
Okay.
And if I may ask, like, you have been doing fantabulous research until now, of course, like doing review and protocol, and then your interest project. And what do you think, and what could be the implication of your research in coming years?
I think there's two main aspects, really. I'm going to focus mainly in this discussion on my intervention trial. And some of them relate to sedentary behavior research, and then I think some of them relate to rehabilitation research. But basically, in terms of from the review, we found that sedentary behavior interventions, they don't incorporate follow-ups, they don't assess clinical outcomes, and they don't have very strong theoretical underpinnings. So to build upon the existing sedentary behavior research, the intervention itself, it now takes place in a sample with mobility limitations, which is the kind of people that a sedentary behavior intervention would most effectively help. Next to that, it does assess clinical outcomes. So it assesses, I took blood samples, and we assess physical function. And also, there's a follow-up after surgery to see, whether or not the impact on sedentary behavior actually is persistent over time. Next to that, we had a very strong theoretical design based on self-determination theory, and we incorporated aspects of these psychological changes as part of self-determination theory into the outcomes for the study. So we could see and assess, all parts of the logical model for the study to see whether the intermediate outcomes and the ultimate outcomes are changing as a result of the study. And of course, in the prehabilitative context, it's the first time an intervention to reduce sedentary behavior has been used in a prehabilitative context. So it's very interesting to see whether or not that will have an impact. And hopefully it will go to move forward the sedentary behavior research field, particularly in older adults, where it's very important for future researchers to assess these clinical outcomes in particular. So not just whether or not it can reduce sedentary time, but whether by reducing sedentary time we can improve health. And of course that's the main reason for doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
And these studies should also try to have, a stronger theoretical basis. So they should have a clear rationale for the design, and it should be based in psychological theory.
And that you really think that that's your future plan as well? Like you are going to enhance your research knowledge in terms of like sedentary behavior for elderly people?
Well, in terms of that in particular, I'm not sure whether I'll stay in sedentary behavior, but I am very interested in behavior change and health. So I'm very much interested in interventions to change behavior, as I think it has a very good potential for, you can do a relatively small intervention and still have a large outcome. And it's also relatively cheap in terms of both manpower and equipment to do this kind of intervention. And I think also in a prehabilitative context, there's not many studies like that. It's more, get everyone in a gym and make them do sets and reps and stuff, but it's not about changing people's motivation or helping people be more active on their own. That precisely I wanted to say as well, that prehabilitation, most of the elderly people, if we take into that account,
most of the elderly people, they want to do something at their own comfort zone, which are their own homes, and they want to do it there. And by reducing their sedentary behavior and doing like small exercise at home itself, like while working in the kitchen or going out or whatever, so I think that is going to be very beneficial for them. And in terms of incorporating this rehabilitation into sedentary behavior, change in the sedentary behavior, or change in their overall behavior towards physical activity, that is going to help them a lot.
Yeah, I hope so. So thank you everyone for listening. This was an episode of the Panini podcast with me, Justin Aunger, and also
Aunger and Rizwan Tahir. And I think we grabbed that opportunity to explain our respective projects in detail, and we really thank everybody to listen.
Yeah, and going forward, you'll be able to find our details on the Panini Project website if you have any questions. And you can find our website by simply Googling Panini Project Birmingham, and it will probably be the top link. And there you can find the articles we're going to be publishing and who the researchers are, and our contact details as well in case you have any questions.
Yeah.